good morning and welcome to Inside Tobago, where we go beyond the beaches. I am your host, Lavia and Cupid, and today is Thursday, the 30th of April, 2026. Thank you so much for joining me right here on the Social Gazette and on Now TV Tobago. Whatever you are doing this morning, it is indeed a pleasure to be seated here before you. I hope that you're hearing my voice as we keep you updated on all things happening in and around Tobago. What are you doing? Are you getting ready for work, school? How are you? I really have to ask, how are you? Because yesterday we would have seen protest action happening in Castara. Roads being blocked, fires being set on the main road for water. We heard reports of water disruptions across the island, actually. So let us know what is happening in your area. Have you received water recently? Still disruptions, truck-borne supply? What is happening in your area? So much happening in Tobago. We also see that we had that on the tourism secretary, that is Zorisha Hackett, is currently in Belize for the Caribbean Tourism Organization Sustainable Tourism Conference. And she's actually out there representing Trinidad and Tobago. We also saw jet ski operators on the island were served with legal documents which was filed by Pigeon Point Heritage Park Limited and the Tobago House of Assembly. I saw a video circulating on social media, jet ski operators quite upset. We wait for a follow-up on that. And also on Tuesday, we saw the Tobago People's Party celebrated their 1 year since the Blue Wave took over Tobago, where they unseated the People's National Movement. And we have Tobago West MP Joel Sampson, Tobago East, Mr. David Thomas. So they celebrated that 1 year victory so far. Also happening in Tobago, we see that about 2 weeks ago, I think I would have mentioned it, the 10 on, 10 off program. Those workers that were promised prior to election campaign and even in the election campaign, we saw Chief Secretary Fali Augustine, who would have said that there would be efforts to streamline these workers. We saw that they would have received sometime recently notices saying that that's it. But then I think a week after I would have made mention of it, they received letters with a 3-month extension. The question is the uncertainty. I would have spoken to some of those workers specifically and personally for myself, who said that they were really looking forward to and depending on the promise made that they would have been regularized. They are looking forward to stable employment. I remember Chief Secretary Fali Augustine said this is not going to be like administrations before, right? The 10 on, 10 off is not a gimmick. And so the question is, after this 3-month extension, what next for them? I see some persons are saying, well, this is how it goes. After an election, that is it for the 10 on, 10 off. But we can't sit and settle with that. That is why I believe most of these persons would have gone out and cast their votes. People do cast their votes because of a promise that was made. They do go out and cast their votes, because they are looking forward to something. Yes, we want to live in a time where persons go out and cast their votes for the greater good of their society, of their country, but individuals actually go out and cast their votes based on what they look forward for themselves. So, of course, we here at the Social Gazette, at Inside Tobago, Now TV Tobago, we're going to reach out to the line secretary and find out exactly what is happening with these workers. What can they look forward to? Or is it that the assembly does not have a budget to continue paying these workers? If so, then how long again after this 3 months extension do they have? Another issue on the island is, did the Tobago House of Assembly have a secret retreat recently to Trinidad? Did the Chief Secretary Fali Augustine and his executive take a retreat to Trinidad that nobody knows about? We did send questions to Chief Secretary Fali Augustine, but we got no response up to this time this morning. We got no response. We don't know yet. But of course, I would have also reached out to a major television station, legacy media station in Trinidad and Tobago, who told me that they were also informed, or they actually heard the very same thing, and are working on a story, or working on an investigative piece. They are looking into it, whether or not there was a retreat taken by the assembly. And if so, why wasn't anybody informed? Of course, that is unethical governance. Why wasn't the public informed? What was it cost? What was the purpose? What was the outcome of this retreat? Once money is being spent from the public purse, citizens ought to know what it was spent for and what was the cost of it, especially in times where earlier this year we saw TSTT spend allegedly $500,000 on a couple of days retreats in Tobago. We have no idea what it was spent on, if that actually did happen, but we are asking this morning. And so we're going to send out our questions again to the Chief Secretary, find out if on retreats, if indeed he and his administration did take a retreat, what was the cost, what was the purpose, and definitely what was the outcome. This morning, of course, you're wondering, Lavian, what are we going to be discussing and who are we going to be talking to? Well, on Sunday, we would have seen the People's National Movement Tobago Council internal election, and former MP for Tobago West, Shamfaka Joel Lewis, winning by a landslide. Not sure how many persons were expecting that, but she is now the second female political leader of the Tobago Council. And so former minority leader Kelvin Morris, he would have lost, I think, Shamfaka Joel Lewis amassed 1,232 votes, I think I could be corrected, and former minority leader Kelvin Morris 730. I know that there are by-elections to be held for the post of PRO, that's Public Relations Officer. I saw that the party said that there was a glitch with the printers, and so that date would be announced soon. But this morning we speak to Dr. Shane Mohammed, political scientist, and get his view as we dissect the recent election, internal election for the People's National Movement Tobago Council, as they look forward to 2030. Find out what could have gone wrong for the persons that believe that former minority leader Kelvin Morris would have won. What went wrong? He would have had stalwarts behind him. He came out with a full slate. Shamfaka Joel Lewis, she ran independently. You know, what was it amongst PNMites in Tobago that they decided that Shamfaka Joel Lewis is the one that is going to not only reunite or attempt to reunite their party, but also is going to be that voice that is going to oppose the sitting Tobago People's Party and also take them into 2030. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. Again, I want to thank you so much for joining me here this morning, joining me on the Social Gazette, Lavian Cupid, and also for viewing us on Now TV Tobago. We have so much in store for you. I want you to keep paying attention to both social media pages, because we are going to be engaging you so much more with current affairs. You are not going to be able to miss a beat, miss a dial. We are going to keep you on your toes and keep you informed with engaging stories and engaging content right here on the Social Gazette and on Now TV Tobago. So as we go for a quick break, I want you to relax and know that Lavian is going to be right back here with Dr. Shane Mohammed as we dissect the recent internal PNM election. You don't want to miss that conversation. All right, so we go for a quick break and we'll be right back.
Welcome to Now TV Tobago, your new home for reliable, credible, and in-depth storytelling. We're here to share Tobago stories with accuracy, integrity, and with the context you deserve. From current affairs and politics to culture, community, festivals, our heritage, sports, and climate, we bring to you the stories that matter and the people who make Tobago truly one of a kind. When you need reliable information, you can count on us. Now TV Tobago. Clarity, context, connection. Your Tobago, your stories now.
Viewers, welcome back to Inside Tobago, where we go beyond the beaches. I want to thank you so much for staying with us as we dive into conversation this morning following the recent People's National Movement Tobago Council internal election, which we saw over the weekend on Sunday the 26th. This morning, we speak to Dr. Shane Mohammed, political analyst, political scientist, as we dissect the results of the last election. Dr. Mohammed, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning right here on Inside Tobago.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So we just saw Shamfa Kojo Lewis, former member of parliament for Tobago West. She was triumphant. She is now the second female political leader of the Tobago Council. Were you surprised by the results on Sunday?
You lead a slate as opposed to when you run independently and singularly. Persons generally vote with the slate and everybody carries in most instances. But what we saw happening, the last count I saw is that 8 out of the 16 from one slate has won. So 8, and the majority of them are also, a lot of them are women. But yes, quite a shock in terms of the nature of how the thing normally works in terms of carries, right? When you vote for a slate and you vote for symbols, normally voters go with, everybody on the slate. There's no mixing per se. But this is not a bad thing. This is actually a different result. It is a mixed slate thus far, led by a woman. I think Shamfa is showing metal, and she is, in thinking about it, in analyzing and looking at it. Well done, Shamfa.
Right. I want to speak to the former minority leader, Kelvin Morris. He would have had stalwarts behind him, Tracy Davidson Celestine, Kelvin Charles. He would have campaigned strongly, heavily on the fact that he was able to reunite these two stalwarts. Do you think that his defeat was part of him having these stalwarts behind him? Was it a rejection of these stalwarts, and possibly not even so much a rejection of him, but possibly his affiliation?
I think that's the thing, though. Political history is something that people seem to forget, and it's not a matter of a rejection of Kelvin Charles. I think what Morris did was he confused the population. He confused the membership, because PNM members don't forget their history. They remember the nitty-gritty. They remember the very in-depth details of what transpired before and after and during an incident. History shows you Kelvin Charles was literally, unceremoniously pushed out of the PNM because of the ambitions of Tracy Davidson Celestine. That's known by everybody on the island who's paying attention to politics, both from the island perspective and the party perspective. So I don't know if there was a unification of both personalities. I think both individuals individually agreed that they supported him, and he got them to endorse him as individuals. That confused the everybody, because you can't say you unified two people. Did you get the two people to come on the stage, to come stand next to each other side by side? In any specific, and is there a picture where the three of you all are holding hands to show the dynamic that there was unification? There could have been simply an endorsement by one person and then an endorsement by another person, all agreeing that yes, both agreeing, yes, you are someone that should carry the mantle forward. That doesn't mean that they are both unified in terms of they will hold hands and show strength and that sort of thing. I think it's also a good feat that he achieved by acknowledging the contribution of Kelvin Charles. Most Tobagonians do recognize that Mr. Charles is contributed very well to Tobago. He was someone that was very approachable. The general consensus across the board is that Kelvin Charles is a good man, and also across the board, people agree that the way in which he exited politics was unkind. and the manner in which it was done. So I think there was a confusion there in terms of the dynamic, um, but it still was not good enough. And the question is why? Why was it still not good enough? And I feel that the membership of the Tobago Council of the PNM still remember, and as such, they were not convinced. It also could very well be an indication of the lack of political maturity of Kelvin Morris. And I wholly position that Kelvin should have done more in his time as minority leader to emerge as and to show his leadership qualities and not stand in the shadows of Ansel Dennis. I stand by that.
Yeah. So is it your opinion that the 4 years he spent as minority leader does not equate to him ascending to the position of political leader within just that 4 years that he would have been in the minority?
I always say the 4 years that that Morris had as minority leader and as the Lone Ranger together with Petal Benoit in the chamber should have been the springboard that led him to emerge himself as the leader, the next leader of the council. One, that it would have cemented him as someone that people, I mean, he's likable, don't get me wrong, and people like Morris. Morris is a nice person. He's a very, he's a very approachable person, very kind. I'm not disputing the characteristics of Kelvin Morris, the individual. There's a very huge difference between Kelvin Morris, the individual, who I quite like actually, and Kelvin Morris, the politician. And when you are in the role of that minority leader and you're transitioning, you have to emerge. Characteristics of leadership must emerge within you. You cannot afford to be in the shadows of another. I mean, he will tell you that several times over the course of the years, him and I would have spoken casually. And I said, boy, you need to start to take over, show that this is yours, start owning that you are next in line. Be Patrick Manning-esque, because Mr. Manning went from 33-3 in 1986 and reconstructed and emerged as the leader, without a doubt, of the PNM when he was given that mantle, and he won the next election. There was the 4 years was the opportunity for Kelvin Morris to learn, to arise, and to win again. Not necessarily win the full election, but show some, at least win your seat.
Right. But even as we speak on his character as an individual, and as you rightfully pointed out, he is a decent guy, a nice guy, approachable. I think there's almost like a good boy persona attached to him. But then we would have looked at the results. We see Shamfa Kojo Lewis, she amassed almost double his votes. So is it that the PNM base in Tobago now is saying that the leader that they need is somebody with fire in the belly, somebody that more has a fighter spirit? Because even if we take a look back at the campaign trail on the last Tobago House of Assembly election, that first night that Shamfa Kojo Lewis graced the first podium, there was an encouragement and inspiration. PNMites felt as though victory was right there in their hand. They felt as though there was a shift. She inspired some sort of win within PNMites that were dormant, that were probably somewhere in a hole hiding. They came out asking every night, is she speaking tonight? Will she be here tonight? So I said that the PNMites in Tobago felt as though probably they needed somebody with more fire.
So, the thing about it is the politics that I learned about and the political behavior and culture of Trinidad and Tobago is one where you have to understand political fire in your belly and translate that political fire in your belly to yield results that amplifies the ground, that builds and ignites and excites and mobilizes by just what you say. But we have to be very, very careful. There's a thin line between political charisma and that ability to energize persons, and then that very thin line we sometimes forget about, where you traverse into a space where you become disrespectful. And I think that is one of the things I will warn Shamfa to be full of. I mean, when I look at her, I did say to another platform and another media house that she changed certain characteristics about herself. She toned down the. She came all the way down in terms of tone of voice, language, how she chose her sentences, all of that. That is very good in terms of leadership. But one has to ensure that when you change yourself to meet the criteria that is needed for leadership, to show that maturity, to show that engagement, to show that understanding, to show that ability to, to understand that unification and the building aspect. You have to know that you can't show that today and then tomorrow get up on a platform and say the worst set of things about politicians. There's a thin line, and that has to be maintained, because then you have people thinking, well, you're not real. You are just a persona. You are just, so you see the flipping the sides now. It's just to show you the juxtaposition. We are collectively agreeing that Kelvin Morris is a good person, is a nice fella, that he is genuinely a kind individual. Those personal characteristics have to at the same time translate into strong leadership qualities that he can be, like Mr. Manning. It is exactly like how Mr. Manning emerged as a prime minister and as the leader of the PNM. The same applies to Shamfa. You can't go into energy and charisma and energizing people, and then you come across as disrespectful and your language is grotesque and disgusting, and you have people like myself rocking back and going, wait, it's really good. Was she real? Why you said that? You don't need to say that. And a typical example, I mean, this is just examples, again, going back into the 2020 general election. It was people's mouth that caused them to grasp almost winning a seat and then losing the seat. So those are the very simple things that people need to pay attention to. Politicians in this age and this time need to go back into their political learnings and teachings. It's not like the PNM doesn't have its institution. The same as the other political parties in the country. It's not like they are not points of reference on leadership and charisma and traits and behaviors that is not present, that they could utilize for their own benefit. So that's where Shamfa has to strike a balance, and consistency is important. Understanding the brief, looking at it, analyzing it, and then effecting it. But be true to who you are. Because if you pretended to be something for the purposes of getting a means to an end, and then when you win it, it's not going to yield results the way you want it to yield, because then you build the momentum and you have long game in front of you, and then halfway through people say, no boy, this ain't working.
But even as we speak on the personas of politicians, do you think that there is a time and place and even capacity and environment for multi-layered personas of politicians, where you use charisma one where you're on a podium and it is all out war because it is a campaign season? Is there a balance to be strike somewhere there, in your opinion?
No, of course, yes, and you see that again, there's all out political war, and Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandey was very clear to describe that so that people understand, and people at all levels of knowledge and understanding will understand. This is an all-out political war to win power. This is not a war against individuals. This is not a personal war. This is not a civil war. This is none of those things. We have to distinguish that we can go on a political platform, ramage, come out with the peacock, level the playing field, excite the people, let the energy flow. But then there could also be pictures where we hug up on the road and we ain't pulling out a big stick to fight each other. That is still, at the end of the day, politics is a subset of the society, and that it does not divide. It allows us to win, but after we win or lose, as the case may be, we could still hug up and take and lime and be civil with each other, be more than civil with each other, because that is one thing that is missing from today's politics in Trinidad and Tobago, that we are so divided that we end up getting emotions of despise and hate and bitterness. And I mean, I could say, Tracy Davidson Celestin is convinced that Shane Mohammed hates her. I don't. I have nothing, and I say this to you, I say this to every station, and I'm also saying it to Tracy. I have absolutely nothing personal against Tracy Davidson Celestin. Why? One, I don't know the lady personally. We probably have met in passing. I don't, you know, what I had and continue to have an issue with is the characterizations of leadership and the leadership behaviors and traits and that sort of thing. The how you go about doing things and getting things done. In you can have personal ambitions, but those personal ambitions must not railroad you to the point where you leave a bad taste in people's mouth. It has to be that you understand what the goal is, achieve the goal. That goal comes with rationality, comes with objective thinking, the ability to negotiate, the ability to discuss, the ability to meet at a middle line. You don't always agree. How you craft that language. There are several things about a bigger picture and knowing how to circumnavigate and how to ebb and weave and how to adapt. Adaptive leadership is very critical, and it's a huge thing in this at this point in time in present time. That's where the issues are. This is not about a personality. Because if it was, then that defeats my job as as a professional.
Right. I want to speak to the numbers that came out because I know earlier I would have heard, I think it was Shamfa Kojo Lewis that mentioned that there was about 10,000 registered PNMites. However, we had less than 2,000, a little less than 2,000 actually coming out to the polls. I think in 2020 they had almost 5,000 PNMites that would have went out to vote. What do you attribute to the low voter turnout, or is it that it's just culture at this time? Because even the last THA election on January 12th, I think it was 48 point something percent of people that actually went out and to cast their ballots.
I think so. You know, the thing about it is, when you think about 2020, there's a natural excitement that comes out of the ground because in 2020, a general election was looming. A THA election was looming. Those things were the apparatus that would have also influenced a political party activity, right? And therefore, in that regard, 5,000 people coming out because they're adjusting to get the right person in the role and the right people who are going to make sure that in the long run they win. The quiet season has arrived in Tobago. Tobago has completed the general election, has completed the TH election. There's no other elections that is nationally or pertains to Tobago that is due until the next 5 years, right? Well, 4 years now. But yeah. So in 4 years' time, the election season, 3 years, 9 months, thereabout, the season is going to start to pick up again. And therefore the excitement and the ground is going to start as well. The ground is trying to reconstruct. PNM is reconstructing. They're doing, I read the article today where Faris is saying that the PNM is doing, introspection and they're reflecting. That's very important. And therefore, what comes out of that, the points that come out of those reflective moments and when they sit down and they look at and they assess and whatever emerges must now inform their decisions going forward, their strategies going forward, how they build, how they connect, whatever, who they choose, when they choose, that sort of thing, choice of language. So I'm not putting too much mind to the 2000 in a quiet season out of, when you look at 10, that's 20%. It's just reasonable.
All right, Dr. Mohammed, after every election, whether it's a THA election or mostly a general election, and the People's National Movement takes a hit, there is always this talk that the PNM is dead. The PNM is dead now. That is it. Finally, the Balizé has been uprooted and discarded. And with the 15-0 in the last Tobago House of Assembly election on January 12th, that is the conversation once again in the opponent's camp that this is it. Even Chief Secretary Fali Augustine would have said that moving forward, homegrown parties is what you are going to see vying for power in the Tobago House of Assembly. That is it for the People's National Movement. But we always see, for some reason, the PNM comes back. Do you think that this is it for the People's National Movement?
It's never it for any political party. When the NER in 1986, it said the PNM was dead, and they came back in 1991. When the UNC lost election in 2001, it was declared that's it. They'd never see the halls of government again. They changed its leader. 2010, it reemerged. When they lost in 2015, an election, I believe that Mrs. Prasad deserved to lose anyways. But say what? That's the voice of the people. There was that declaration that she'd never be prime minister ever again, and she has resurfaced in 2025. People, politics is also about people. It's about real human relations. While it's quantitative in data, it is also qualitative in data, because that person subjective aspect of it is very, very critical and very important. Politics is rooted in the emotions and feelings and capacities and serving of people. So therefore, you can't declare that any political party really and truly is dead. A political party kills its political life by its own actions and its own fragmentations and its own indecisiveness and incapacities and incapabilities of meandering the journey along the way to get back in. What and how it does or doesn't do is something that is left to political parties. The same applies to those that are in power. Those that are in power, when they become overconfident, when they become hubristic, when they fail to appreciate the goodwill that was bestowed upon them, gifted to them by the people, they also will suffer consequences. Another aspect of it is that the success of one political party is also attributed to the failure of another. So that's that scale, that balancing of winning and losing and meandering and whatnot. So it's a combination of so many different aspects that the declaration that any one political party is dead is really and truly something that it's part of the rhetoric, but a party is only dead until it's deregistered and its political leader or participants say, oh, we're calling it a day, and that's the end of that. Thank you very much for the participation and the support, but we're calling it a day. That is not something that we could declare that they're dead. And it's in terms of homegrown political parties on the island of Tobago, the PNM has been there from inception, and for a very long time we've seen transitions. But here's the thing, right? These political parties that are opposed to the PNM over time, they fail to look at the root of the history that over the years opposition parties have evolved. And when you go back to the history of the root cause of that, then you'd be able to understand the true historical landscape, historical political landscape of Trinidad and Tobago in relation to the PNM versus other entities that have emerged. So I believe that any political party can be declared true. Political party can truly be declared dead. That's something that I'm yet to see outside of what I just said.
Dr. Mohammed, I think, and I don't know, but tell me what you think on this, because we see political parties many a times, they campaign against the People's National Movement. The campaign is veered toward removing the People's National Movement. And then they are successful, they are in office. And it sometimes seems as though they spend a lot of time in a celebratory mood and a mood of saying, well, here we are, you see, we moved the PNM. And is it that they spend too much time in that mood, that they forget to stay in favor with the people? They forget to focus on governance and to focus on the next election that is coming up, because then for some reason the People's National Movement creeps up and then it's back in a cycle again. What are your thoughts on that?
So the one thing that you have to take into consideration is that these political parties consistently are in campaign mode. And when you are consistently in campaign mode, you it's part of your, and when it becomes part of your culture, you have to learn when the campaigning ends and the work begins to be able to campaign again. Because you campaign, you win, you celebrate, you get the work done. The work that you do in year 1, year 2, year 3, in some instances year 4, will then build for you to then campaign on what you've done in order to win again. If you are campaigning after you win in year 1 and year 2 and year 3 and year 4, but you forget that there's a level of delivery. You forget that there's a level of settling into office and becoming effective governance in governance, and you find yourself in a problem. Now, you also cannot afford to get too comfortable in office, because comfort in office leads to complacency. Complacency leads to disconnect. And then you're going to start to ignite a different level of emotion among the people. And if you're not emotionally intelligent from a political science perspective, then you will feel the brunt of what the result of that is. I mean, the PNM knows that very well. The PNM knows how that feels. And the UNC as well knows how that feels. Members who in the top and in the PDP, they understand as well what defeat looks like and how it can be gut wrenching and demotivating and demoralizing, and you literally have to start from scratch. That tumble from the top to the bottom of the hill is not an easy one, and therefore you have those that are in power now must appreciate not just what being in power feels like from a individual superficial surface level aspect. You have to understand what that power allows you to do in a much deeper manner, in terms of service, in terms of deliverance of speaking, in terms of connecting, in terms of comforting. That is a whole different approach altogether. So defeating the PNM is one, and there's a reason for the defeating of the PNM, because it's been the party in power from 1956, and it is the party that got into power when we became an independent nation. So they are seen as the Goliath, but it's all about equal ground. It's everybody now is on equal ground. Shamfa is actually at a point where I said it on my page. She has the advantage of long game. What Shamfa does and how she plays that long game at a national level and at a homegrown level in Tobago is going to determine how the party, how the party performs in the other two sets of elections that will come in 2030.
Right. And before we wrap, of course, I have to ask you about the United National Congress 1 year in office. On Tuesday, they celebrated 1 year in office. I saw several political analysts and scientists, some weighing in, some saying if election is called tomorrow, they're going to win. One Dr. Bishnu Raghunath, he said, well, he doesn't think it's wise or fair. I'm paraphrasing here, to rate or rank them at this time. Or what are your views on their 1 year in office thus far?
So I did several categories in which you assess a government, and I will tell you that at the end of the day, we have to remember that the government has come into office after 10 years. Systems, processes, procedures, all of those things, accounts, all of that has to be investigated, because you now fact find out how much we have, what is what, who is where, why it is being done like that. I mean, look at the PAC, look at the different investigations that has happened, the analyses, the discoveries, whatnot. You have to make sure that all of those things are aligning to government policy, aligning to vision of the Prime Minister, long-term outcomes as envisioned by the Prime Minister. I strongly believe, and it shows, and I agree with it, the Prime Minister has a very strong showing. The Prime Minister has emerged as a very unhinged leader, which I have a real appreciation for, because I am a realistic, what you see, what you get. I somebody said to me, Dr. Mohammed, you tend to be very controversial. I think controversy is good because it sparks certain realities, and it's better than pushing the dirt under the carpet. Let's just raise it up and see what it is. So I agree with the approach. I also very much appreciate from a geopolitical perspective, I agree with our foreign policy. When you are starting from scratch, when your economy is stagnated, when you require growth and development, when you require foreign direct investment, the volatility of the international politics requires that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, whoever that is, will adjust accordingly and do what needs to be done to align to be the direct site of the hegemony. Prime Minister has done that. So Prime Minister is way ahead of her team, and that's the fact. The government as a whole is performing at a B plus, somewhere around there, which is good, because if you're performing optimally, you can't perform optimally because there are going to be strengths and weaknesses. There are going to be opportunities and threats. That's the reality of the thing. What the government has to do is, instead of beat themselves up or beat up on me or anybody who is saying that, you're not an A grade, your prime minister is ahead, that's a plus, right? It shows that there are people, the reality is that people will take more time than others to adjust to office, that they will take more time than others to understand what the portfolio requires, understand systems, because some people are coming into office for the very first time, don't know an ounce about public sector management or public administration, and therefore they have to understand that. How fast they do it depends on their own, abilities. But government is generally performing good, quite well, B plus, according to academic examination standards, which is not bad. It means, therefore, that that we and I and others recognize that there's work to be done. They recognize that there's work to be done. And by the time the 28th of April 2027 comes around, they should be pushing towards getting into a 75%, working in a 70 to 75% percentile range, where you could then try to build in the third year a 75 to 80% range, so that you can sail into a decisive victory. That would be a strategy if I would advise anybody. So not bad, very well. Things must be improved. There's a lot of hopefulness that still exists across the country in Trinidad and Tobago, and that level of hopefulness cannot be overlooked or denied by those in office. And there's a high level of expectation. It should not only be resting on the shoulders of the Prime Minister, it should be shouldered by everyone who has been given an opportunity and a portfolio to also effect the vision and the promise that was made. Yeah.
But even as you speak of a particular level of expectation among citizens, do you think that there is an equal dissatisfaction? Because there are persons, there is a sector of citizenry that are upset that they haven't seen promises come to fruition, that are upset with the 40,000 persons that lost their jobs, that are upset with our foreign policy aligning with the US. Taking into consideration, we are a post-colonial nation, so there are persons, and that's whether you're East Indian or African. There's, I think that you can agree that we live in a time where white supremacy and elitism are factors within the society that persons are pushing back against, that nobody wants to be a part of. So there are citizens that believe that we should not align with the US because it seems as though, we are rubbing shoulders with the white man, quote unquote. So do you think that there's an equal dissatisfaction just as there is the expectation?
So you will always have dissatisfaction to balance the satisfaction. The degree of dissatisfaction and the degree of satisfaction will vary depending on who you talk to, the society, the demographic, whatnot, right? Here's the thing about all of that elitism and white supremacy. That's America's problem. Quite frankly, that's not our issue. America made decisions with regard to their government and governance, and that is their right. They are intelligent people. They made, just like every other nation in the world, they make decisions based on their needs. Trinidad and Tobago, they make decisions based on their political decisions, based on needs and wants, likes and dislikes, right? So whatever is happening in the domestic politics of America, America made that decision. They have to resolve that. However, in a geopolitical world, taking into consideration our heritage and our alignment, it does not prevent us from politics is about one of the greatest things and foundations of politics and political science is self-interest. It started by seeking one's own self-interest, wanting better for oneself, understanding that the state of nature could not exist like the way it did without without organization, without bartering, and that's the very foundation of politics. It has just evolved over time and grown by the different theorists over the years. As such, we are also in a period of self-interest for all states across the world. And that is where sovereignty is important. Because that of the word because we are all sovereign nations and sovereignty exists, it gives us the license to seek our self-interest. And if that self-interest has to be alignment or being in the direct side in order to achieve your goals, and you do what you need to do, because then that levels that also leads to self-sufficiency. So we have an onus to ourselves as well as a developing nation to become self-sufficient, like the Singapores and the Malaysias, which we all like to quote and talk about and aspire to be. Well, now is the chance. And if those that lead us are serious, are innovative, which I mean, that's why the Prime Minister has taken the position that she has, because, and which I agree with, it is to get us to a point where alignment would be on our terms, not be because of certain determinants that we require in order for us to get in a particular direction. Therefore, when we become self-sufficient, when we have attained the goals of diversification, of renewable energy, of engineering the agrarian system, one of the flaws that we suffer from is that short-sightedness, and we conditions and conditionalities, context and conditionalities today are now forcing us to think long term and to be able to build a system and a trajectory where we're not thinking every 5 years. And it's not only to win an election, because if we continue in that mindset, we turn out to be sore losers as a people and as a nation. And development would be nothing that is development would only be an envy, not an actuality. That's where I would put that.
All right. Dr. Mohammed, I want to thank you so much. I wish we had more time because I would have loved to expound some more on this conversation with you. But I know for a fact you would not be a stranger with us right here on Inside Tobago or the Social Gazette or Now TV Tobago. On a whole, you are going to be back. We're going to invite you back as we have more conversations right here regarding Trinidad and Tobago, even specifically Tobago. Thank you again so much for joining us this morning. I want to wish you a pleasant day. All right, viewers, so we were speaking to Dr. Shane Mohammed, political scientist right here in Trinidad and Tobago, as we dissect the recent People's National Movement internal election for Tobago Council, where we saw former Member of Parliament for Tobago West, Shamfa Kojo Lewis, emerge as the winner, as the political leader. All right. So that's it for us this morning here on Inside Tobago, where we go beyond the beaches. I hope you enjoyed this morning's program. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And I want to wish you a really pleasant day. We look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday morning, right here at 6:30 a.m. on the Social Gazette and on Now TV Tobago. Have a pleasant day.